Yeah,
All yours.
thanks. Well, again, welcome everybody. Happy Monday. We've got Jessie in the studio, so she's going to teach you how to paint farmhouse pumpkins in just about an hour. Just to let everybody know, we try to go at a really good pace for everybody. It's hard with so many people. So Jessie will try to take her time so people have enough time to stay caught up and paint along. But if you're not able to paint along and you need to go back, or you're just watching to be inspired tonight and you want to watch this video, don't forget that all these videos, including this one after, will be available on michaels.com on their community classroom page. So that is a great thing that Michaels has done, is they make all these classes available to you, again, for free after the fact. You can always go back and watch. But again, we'll try to go at a good pace. Jessie's such an amazing teacher. Also, you can get all this product that Jessie is using on michaels.com or in the store. I know there's a lot of great options for delivery and curbside pickup still, so depending where you are. Also, we want to remind you, after you're done painting, to hashtag your painting, make it with Michaels, and also hashtag plaid crafts, because then we can see what you guys are painting, especially if you've joined our Let's Paint with Plaid Facebook group. So lots of great content and options there, and thank you, Michaels, again for having us. And I'm gonna turn it over to Jessie. I'll be answering comments and questions, but otherwise it's all you, it's your show.
Hey guys, so like Kira said, my name is Jessie, and we're gonna be painting farmhouse pumpkins tonight. So I saw a couple people say, hey, I think I actually painted this already. So if you want to paint it again, I highly recommend it, because I feel like each time you paint it, you learn something and you perfect it a little more. Or you can grab some of your different paint colors and do orange pumpkins or tan pumpkins, whatever you'd like to do. But yes, we are repeating this because the first one sold out, and I think people requested to have a second class with this one. So just so you know, like Kira said, this is the second time we'll be teaching this. Okay, so I'm gonna let you know what supplies we're gonna be using today. So I have a 10 by 10 square canvas here. So this is just a stretched canvas. You can see it's a little bit smaller than our original, but that's because we only have an hour, so just a little bit less surface area to cover. So 10 by 10 canvas. I've got my palette paper here as always, and this is just wax coated paper. You can get this in like the fine art section at Michaels. So this is really great for putting your paint on and for mixing your paint. I love this a lot. I have paper towels here for cleaning my brushes. I've got my water basin also for cleaning brushes. And then the brushes I'm using tonight, this is the 7-piece Craft Smart variety set. So I got this at Michaels. I really like this set a lot because just like in the title, it's got a lot of variety. So you've got like a nice large flat brush and some rounds. So I recommend, this is what we use a lot of the time for these Monday night classes. So I recommend going and getting this. It's really affordable, it's really inexpensive, and it's a great pack of brushes. I also have a palette knife here tonight. So we won't be painting with the palette knife. We're just going to be adding some texture at the end. So you can see, you can probably guess where the palette knife will be, but we will be painting with brushes tonight. So if you don't like the palette knife, don't get stressed. We're just gonna be using it for details. And then the paints we're using, like Kira said, we always use our favorite paints, which are FolkArt acrylics. And the colors we've got are real brown. So this is just any brown paint will do. It's like a chocolatey, just true brown color. I've got vintage white. So if you don't have vintage white and you just have a regular acrylic white, you can mix a little bit of your brown into it. So if you don't have this, is like an ivory off-white sort of color, just mix a tiniest touch of your brown into your just regular white acrylic paint, and you'll get a very similar color. Then I've also got light blue, which is just like the title, light blue. And then I've got French blue, which is like they're kind of, here's the difference here. This is the light blue, and then this is a mixture with the French blue. So it's kind of like a softer, less bright version of this light blue here. So that's why I've got the two separate ones. And then we've got navy blue. So just any navy color will work for this. And then one of our favorite paints, we are so obsessed with it, we like add it to every painting, is our treasure gold paint. So this is super metallic, it's super shiny, and I love it so much. So if you're a painter and you ever add metallics, a lot of times they're either dull looking or they're smelly, they're toxic, and they're solvent based. So this one is super shiny, it's not dull at all, and it is non-toxic and water based. So I highly recommend. You can see how much it's just like shining in the bottle. That's just the paint inside the bottle. So we're gonna be using Treasure Gold in the color gold. This is the original formula. So if you got any metallic paints, I would go ahead and grab that. All right, any questions about supplies before we get started, Kira? I'm gonna take that as a no. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do is we are going to grab some of our navy blue. We're gonna put just a tiny bit of that onto our palette. I've been using this one a lot. So just a little bit. I put about a dime-sized amount for now. And I'm going to grab my number 5 round brush. So this is like a small to medium round brush. We're just gonna be doing some sort of drawing with our paintbrush. We're gonna sort of outline our pumpkins first so we can get an idea of where everything will be on our canvas before we start really adding in color. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna put some water on my brush, and I'm just gonna water down my paint a little tiny bit. And the reason I do this is because I want it to be sort of an inky consistency. Because whenever I'm painting just outlines or sort of doing like my original, I always call it sketches. I'm doing sort of like my original sketches. I like it to be really super flat. And so when you add water, you get a really flat line, as opposed to if you just use the thick, creamy paint, you'll have sort of a ridge to that line. So once it dries, it'll be sort of a bump because it is so thick and creamy. That's why we water it down just for this part to a little bit of an inky consistency. So that's what I'm doing here. Again, it's my number 5 round brush. So it's just like a large liner brush, but if you're familiar with that, or if you've got one of those laying around, something like that, like a small to medium round brush. But truly any round brush will work. If you want to use a bigger one or a smaller one, it will totally work for this. Okay, so the first thing I like to do whenever I'm painting a painting is to lay out my shapes. So I'm sure many of you have like written a happy birthday sign or something, and you start writing and it's really hard to sort of eyeball where your word is going to end, and you run out of space by the time you get to the day and birthday. So that's kind of what we're right about here. We want to make sure we don't run out of space when we're painting our pumpkins. So here, imagine this. Here, I'll move this over. Imagine this is your canvas. You're going to say, oh, I'm going to paint my pumpkin here, and then I'm going to paint my pumpkin here, and you didn't leave enough space. It's a really easy thing to do, especially if you're not if you don't necessarily, think of yourself as a drawer. That's totally fine. So what I like to do is, if this is my canvas, I like to first lay out, I like to make little marks to know where I want each of my shapes to end, and then I know that it's going to fit into it. So when I mark off the edges, I can make sure that all of my shapes are going to fit perfectly onto my canvas. So that's kind of what we're about to do right now. So I'll show you where we're going to make our marks. Okay, so again, just as a reminder, in case people are still sort of trickling in, we are using our number 5 round brush, and I watered down some navy blue paint, and we are about to mark off the edges of where we want our pumpkin shapes to be, to make sure that we have space and that we put them exactly where we want them before we start painting them. All right, so on my 10 by 10 canvas, I'm going to start with the left side. So I'm going to go about maybe an inch in. So again, I'm just eyeballing it. I'm not using my, not using a ruler or anything. So sort of the bottom left, I'm going to mark it about an inch. Again, I'm eyeballing it, so it doesn't need to be perfect. And then I'll say maybe I'll do about an inch from the bottom as well. And then I'm going to guesstimate. I want to make sure that these are spaced evenly. So I'm just going to kind of take a peek and try to make sure that I have sort of a square thing going on. I want it to be even. And then again, we're going to do the same thing on the top. We want to make sure it's even there too. So I have sort of a little plus sign going here with the edges of where I want my pumpkin to be. And we're going to do the same thing for our larger pumpkin. So this pumpkin, I want him to be sitting back a little bit further. He's sort of behind that pumpkin. So this line will be a little bit further up, just a little bit. So I'll make my line there. And then I'll probably stick with my sort of inch rule right now. So I'm going to go about an inch from the right. And of course, I want him to be taller. So I'm going to mark it about there. And then he's going to be behind it. So we're going to go about here with our line. So we've sort of got these 4 marks that we're going to use as the edges for our pumpkin shapes. So since we have these marks, all we need to do now is connect them. So this is also helpful because if you're sort of intimidated about drawing circles, which a lot of people are, I am myself, because it's really easy to make circles sort of wonky and lopsided. And of course, pumpkins are very symmetrical. That's sort of just what like makes the pumpkin shape so, you know, recognizable, is that it's so symmetrical. So we want to make sure that our pumpkins are not wonky, they're not lopsided, because that's going to make our painting look more realistic. So what we're going to do now is we are going to just connect these lines. So I'm just going to round it out, just do a sort of a curved line, just round it out and connect all of these lines together. So these 4 little dashes that we made, and do the same thing for my larger pumpkin. All right, so hopefully that made sense to everybody. So we've got our 2 pumpkin shapes here, and this is the time where you can kind of go back, and if you feel like you want to change anything, if you want to move anything around, now's the time to do it. So I'm just sort of rounding out mine a little bit more, getting the edges how I like them before we start adding in color. Okay, so before we start adding in color, we want to make sure we get our stems in there too, because that's really the other shape that goes with our pumpkins here. So to do that, we're going to break it down super easy. All we're going to do is we're going to draw sort of a cone or a triangle on top of the pumpkin, and then we're going to draw sort of just a stick coming out of it. So I'll show you what I mean. I just sort of a peak here, like a little mountain on top of our pumpkin. And then we're going to draw a little rectangle coming out of that. Just as simple as that. So a little mountain shape coming out of the top, and then a little stick coming out of that, just a little rectangle coming out of that. And that's just sort of the base for our stem shape. And I really like breaking down, drawing into simple shapes, because everything in the world can be broken down into simple shapes. Horses, the human body, anything you want to draw can be broken down into circles and squares and rectangles and triangles. And it just makes things a lot simpler and a lot less intimidating. So go ahead, I'll let people catch up for just a minute while I just grab a sip of water. So just make sure you've got all of your pumpkins drawn, and then we're going to start adding some color in just a minute. Clean off my brush real good. I always like to make sure that my brush is super clean between each color. I just saw someone ask, do the lines need to be bold? No, they do not. They just need to be so that you can see them. If they're super light, that's fine. Even if you use the light blue or something, that's fine. As long as you can see them to put the color in. Don't stress about how thick or thin or anything like that. We just want to have those shapes. And over here, I don't know if she's muted. All right. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start adding some color. So the first color we're going to add is our light blue. This is just a really pretty light blue color. And we are going to put a little bit of this onto our palette. So just a little bit. I'll start with a dime-sized amount. I always put just a little tiny bit of paint on my palette because I don't like to waste it. So I can always add more, but it's harder to take it away or to save it. So I'm just going to use, I've got my number 8 flat brush here, which is just a tiny flat brush. So anything like this you've got at home, bigger or smaller is fine, but this is the one that I'm going to use. We're going to go ahead and we're going to just fill in our small pumpkin shape. And we want to go right up to the navy blue border that we have. And you can even start covering that up a little bit because we don't want to see that line in the final painting. As you can see, we want to make sure that just looks like a regular shape. So you can even try to cover that up, but we can also cover that up with the background color. So don't stress if you're having trouble covering it up perfectly. Okay. So again, we're using our number 8 flat brush and light blue. And all we're doing is we're just filling in this little pumpkin that we just painted. We're just filling it in with color. all we need is just a nice even coat. If you don't have complete coverage, you really should, because FolkArt just has excellent coverage, and I'm definitely not gonna need a second coat, you can see here. But if you do feel like yours isn't quite as smooth, don't stress about it, because we're gonna be adding so much texture on top, you're not really gonna see any sort of lines or streakiness. So try to just put all of your colors in one direction. And if you have a little bit of lines showing, that's totally fine. Because like I said, we're gonna go back and we're gonna add these lines, we're gonna add all of this palette knife work, so don't worry about it.
Jessie, I'm still here. Can you hear me? Oh yeah, I've just been quiet since you're painting and nobody really has questions. I think everyone's just painting.
Oh good, I was like, where'd Kira go?
I'm totally listening, and I've been chatting back and forth with some people on private message. They've had some questions. I'm still here though.
Awesome, good. Okay, cool.
Sorry, everyone's just kind of painting, and seems like we're going at a good pace, so I don't want to interrupt.
No, not at all, not at all. Okay.
Those are beautiful circle pumpkin ovals. If you want some commentary, I can always talk.
I asked a question earlier, and I think you didn't hear me, and I was like, oh no, where's Kira? Did she get disconnected?
Oh no, I was chatting away with people.
No worries.
It's a quiet group tonight.
That's okay. It's nice and relaxing that way.
It is relaxing.
Okay, I'm gonna grab a new paper towel. Okay, so go ahead and get your small pumpkin painted. And the next color we're gonna be using is we're gonna grab some of our French blue. And this one's not much darker than the light blue, so we're gonna add just the tiniest bit of navy. So we already have navy on my palette. So we're gonna add just the tiniest bit of navy. So to mix it, what did I just do with that brush? We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna use our 3/4 inch flat brush. So I'm gonna pick up, like I said, just the littlest bit of navy. So hopefully you can see, I just put a little bit of navy paint on the corner of my brush, hardly any paint, and I'm gonna mix that into my French blue. And the reason we have both of these blues, you may be wondering, well, why don't we just use the light blue, is because this French blue has like a really pretty, like sort of dusty tone to it. And this one's sort of just like a bright, pure light blue. So that's why I wanted to make sure we had both, just because you can see in the final painting how different they are. This one's really dusty and just like a little bit warmer. So that's why we're gonna be using both of them in our painting. So again, this was mostly French blue. And then I mixed just the tiniest bit of navy blue into it just to make it look much different than our light blue pumpkin. Okay, so we're gonna use that to fill in our larger pumpkin. Do the same thing we did for the smaller one. I'm gonna go right up to our smaller pumpkin here, right up to the edge, because this one's behind, of course, don't forget that. Unless you wanted to put your larger pumpkin in front, that's perfectly fine too. Go right up to these edges. You can see, like I was talking about before, it's got such great coverage. I have no brush strokes, no streaks in that at all. It just covers the canvas so beautifully, which again is why, oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna, sorry, again, now it's weird timing when I talk. I was just gonna comment that it's so perfect. Like, it looks like the perfect base coat of that pumpkin on camera.
No, it is in person too. There's no, I mean, it's not me, it's the paint. It just covers so beautifully. It's so smooth and creamy. And like I said, that's why we love painting with FolkArt acrylic, because it's just, like I said, so rich and creamy, and the coverage and the pigment is just beautiful. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and clean my brush off. How's everybody doing, Kira?
I mean, good. I think everybody's just painting. It's very quiet again. I can see everybody painting.
Awesome. I'm glad you guys are painting along. I love that.
Yeah, people are enjoying the class.
Awesome. Okay, so like I said, make sure you get your brush nice and clean between colors. So the next thing we're going to do is we are going to paint our stems, and we're going to do a little bit of mixing for that. Not a lot, just a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab my real brown. Again, any brown will do if you have coffee bean, or if you have some sort of umber, burnt umber or raw umber, those will work too. And then I'm going to grab a little bit of my vintage white. So for this one, if you just have regular white, that's fine too, because we're just going to lighten our brown a little bit. So regular white will absolutely do the trick. So again, I've got my real brown and my vintage white, and I'm going to go ahead and pick up my number 8 flat brush again. So this is the brush that we used to paint our little pumpkin. And I'm going to put just a little bit of vintage white into the real brown and see if I like it. So I always start mixing when I'm not sure of how much of each color I need. I'll just mix a little bit, and then I can decide whether I like the color, and I'll know what I need to add more of. Because of course you can't take it out, but you can always add more. So I started it, and I wanted a little bit more vintage white just because I want it to be a little bit lighter. You can see we have some lighter stems here, the base coat anyway. So I have this nice light, it's sort of like a coffee with creamer color. It's like a nice tan color. So that's what we're looking for. And we're just gonna go ahead and we're gonna paint in our stem shape. Again, we're using the number 8 flat. We just mixed real brown with vintage white. And I'm trying to cover up, like I said, with our pumpkins, I'm trying to cover up my outline a little bit. But if you don't feel like you can get it done just sort of like naturally, if you feel like if you cover that up, it's gonna get too thick, we can cover it up with the background color. So if you made your lines really thick and covering it up with the stem color is gonna make your stem look thick and sort of awkward, don't worry about it. Like I said, we'll go back with the background color. You can cover it up then. Do the small one. So these are looking kind of blocky. So we're gonna go ahead and we're going to sort of round them out as well. So once I've got it all painted in, all the color, they look a little bit too like geometric. So we're gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna sort of smooth out that curve a little, that little curve we had there. So you can see here, all I'm doing is just smoothing out that curve so it's not so blocky. And then you can add even a little bit more on the end if you want it to be a little bit more crooked looking. Just make it a little more realistic. Now I'm gonna clean my brush off again.
I'm still here.
Okay, good. I can hear you clicking, so I know you're still there now.
Good, yes.
All right, so the next thing we're gonna do is we are going to paint our background. So we're gonna go ahead, I'm gonna grab my vintage white. And again, if you don't have vintage white or if you don't have something similar to this, just go ahead and grab your just regular white, any acrylic you have, and mix the tiniest, just a touch of brown into it, and that'll just make it a little bit warmer, like a little bit of a parchment color. So I'm gonna grab my 3/4 inch flat brush, and I'm gonna paint the background using this off-white color. It looks really white on camera. So here, I'm gonna add a little brown because it looks super white on camera. So I'm gonna take just a touch of brown, just a tiny bit, and add it to my vintage white because I want it to be a little bit darker. I wanna be able to see it better. But if you want it to be brighter, that is totally fine. It's totally up to you. It's still pretty light.
I should have brought supplies home with me to paint along.
No, that would have been so fun. I feel like you've probably painted this painting several times.
I don't know if I've ever done this one.
I love this painting.
I do too. I love the color. Blue.
Mm-hmm. I do too. Thank you. We're just going around our pumpkins. Again, don't forget, this is a good time if you've got any outlines showing to go ahead and just try to get as close as you can to your shapes and paint over those navy blue outlines because we don't want to see those anymore. right up to the edge. And again, we're using our 3/4 inch flat brush. And we're using vintage white. I grab a little bit more vintage white because I just ran out. Again, I'm adding just a little bit of my real brown because it was looking a little bit light on camera and I wanted to be able to see that off-white color. You can see here I've got some of my navy blue lines showing, so I'm making sure I get right up to my pumpkin so that we don't see those. Okay. All right, so that is it. I finished painting my background, so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna clean my brush off. And we're gonna hope that this dries. We're gonna work on our pumpkins a little bit. Hopefully it'll dry. If not, I'm gonna grab a hair dryer. So if you wanna go ahead and grab a hair dryer now, feel free to do so. I'm gonna play it by ear a little bit and hope that mine dries in time before we get back to the background. So feel free to do the same. But if it is not dry in the next couple steps, then I am gonna grab a hair dryer. So if you wanna do that, feel free to grab one now.
Some people are asking what other colors they can use. So somebody actually, this is their second time painting it, so they're doing different color variation. They're doing it in greens, which I think would be beautiful. You could also do traditional orange. You could do like dark orange and a light orange. You could do white, like shades of cream and ivory. So you could do, you know, a whole collection of these. So lots of different variations, and depending on, you know, what paint you have and are able to get.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the idea of whites and greens because that'd be like sort of like gorgeous, like green and yellow. That's a great idea.
Yeah, and again, on Michael's community classroom page, you can watch this video again, so you can paint along when you are ready.
Yeah, I like watching, whenever I'm watching a video and learning something new, I like to just watch it first so I can sort of like take it in and really pay attention and focus, and then I'll go back and rewatch it if I'm actually going to craft it or build it or paint it or whatever it is that I'm watching. So I really recommend doing it that way, but also it's great to paint along. Okay, so the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna grab my, where's my round brush? I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna grab my number 5 round brush again. So this was the brush that we used originally to draw the outline of our pumpkins. So I'm gonna grab that guy. And I'm also going to grab some light blue. So if you need to put some more light blue on your palette, feel free to do so now. And also make sure you've got navy. So we need navy and light blue right now for this next step. Again, I already have those in my palette, so I'm not gonna grab any more. Okay, so pick up your number 5 round brush, and I'm gonna grab some navy, and I'm gonna draw the lines on our pumpkins. So of course, pumpkins have these sort of segments to them, which make them look 3-dimensional. We wanna make sure our pumpkins have those too so that they look more real. So the way that I sort of describe it is there's going to be sort of a shape in the center that's sort of like an eye shape or like a long football, and then there's going to be shapes mirroring that middle one. So here, I'll show you what I mean. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna start at the top, and I'm gonna curve down to the left, and then I'm gonna curve down to the right, you can see it's sort of like I said, like an eye shape or like a long football. You can see I didn't put very much paint on my brush, so that way it's easier to fix if I make a mistake. So I like that. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna make that a little bit darker. Whenever I'm just sort of freehanding something like this, I don't use very much paint, like I said, because then it's easier to go back and correct or just edit if you feel like you need to do so. And I'm going to put 2 lines on either side to mirror those lines. And I like where those are, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to fill those in with a little bit more paint. Just carefully fill in those lines. Okay, so now we're gonna do the same thing for our smaller pumpkin. We're gonna use a little bit of a lighter color. We're not gonna use the navy blue because that's gonna be really stark against that light blue. So we're gonna mix a little bit. We're gonna mix our light blue with just a touch of navy. So I'm still using the same brush. I haven't changed brushes, my number 5 round brush. So I've got my light blue and I mix just a touch of navy in it because you want it to be just a little bit darker than the light blue itself that'll show up on this pumpkin here. So whatever color you're doing, if you're doing green pumpkins, just make this green a little bit darker just so that it stands out against this color. So we're gonna do the same thing for this guy. We're gonna start at the top and we're gonna pull down to the left to do this sort of long football shape, and then to the right, and then we're gonna mirror the lines on either side. Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab my hairdryer real quick, which I knew I was forgetting something. It's just right here. So if you want to go ahead and do the same thing at home, we're gonna go ahead and dry our background so we can start palette knifing. Did you hear me, Kira, when we started? I said to John, I was like, I feel like I'm forgetting something. And he said, you got paint, you'll be fine. I was like, all right, sounds good. I was right. Okay, so I've got my hair dryer here. This is just a regular hair dryer. Really, it's just super inexpensive from like the grocery store or something. So I always have one of these guys handy when I'm painting because I'm a little impatient and I don't like to paint wet on top of wet with acrylic paint. So I like to have this in between. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna dry my background. I like to use the highest setting and I'll start on hot and then I'll switch. I have this sort of like cool setting. I'll switch from hot to cold. So if you've got a fan or something, or if you just want to let your painting dry and finish it later, it's totally up to you. Okay, so that's plenty dry for this. So my background is nice and dry now, and we're going to start drawing, sort of painting in our shiplap. So if you're unfamiliar with shiplap, I kept saying it last time, and then I realized somebody said shiplap, and I was like, maybe that's not something that everybody knows. So it's just sort of that whitewashed paneling in homes. It's like really popular in sort of a farmhouse sort of look. So that's what I'm calling this background here. So just this white paneled wood is what we're going to start painting in. So I still have my number 5 round brush, and I still have light blue on my palette. So that's what we're going to be using for this step, just to draw in the lines, because then a lot of this darkness is going to be added with the palette knife. but we want to know where to put our palette knife. So that's why we're going to sort of paint in these lines real quick. So to do that, we're going to eyeball this again. If you want to grab a ruler, if you feel more comfortable, you can totally do that. But I very rarely use a ruler when I'm painting. I just like to sort of guess. So we're going to start from the bottom, and I'm going to hold my finger. It's probably about 3 inches. I'm again just guesstimating. So I'm probably got about 3 inches here, and I'm going to mark that. So about 3 inches, and I'm going to try my very best not to move my hand this entire time. So I'm going to keep my fingers, and I'm going to move it over to the other side, about 3 inches from the bottom. And then I'm going to go up from there, about 3 inches. I'm going to move it to the other side, about 3 inches. And chances are my finger's probably moving a little bit as I do this, but it just doesn't bother me. It doesn't need to be absolutely perfect. I want it to look, you know, as horizontal and as level and symmetrical as I can, but I'm not super stressed about it being perfect. So here, I'll mark these so you can see them a little better on screen, and then I'll go back and I'll show you one more time what I just did there. So again, I've got my number 5 round brush, and I've got light blue, and I'm holding my hand so it's about, my fingers are about 3 inches apart, and I mark it on the bottom left, and then I moved it to the right and marked it, and then I moved it up and marked it, and then went across, and then I continue the same thing all the way to the top. And so I have, again, about even lines. Because again, we're going to be adding so much texture. If it's a little bit off or one line's a little bit higher than the other, you're not going to notice because this is a very loose painting when all is said and done. So now I'm going to do my best to connect them. So here on the bottom, it's going to be easy because the pumpkins are covering most of it. So you kind of just continue your lines in until they meet the pumpkins. And it's really the same for the middle one as well. So just sort of continue the lines, try to make them as, you know, evenly horizontal as you can. But again, if it's not perfect, do not stress. Just try to make it sort of level. And this top one is probably going to be the trickiest out of all of them. So if you feel like you want to grab a piece of paper or something to sort of line those up, if that makes you more comfortable, you can totally do that. But I'm just going to start, like I said, sort of eyeball it again. Just paint in those lines there. Do my best to get a straight line, but if not, it doesn't bug me. But like I said, feel free to grab a straight edge if it's going to stress you out. Okay, so I've got my panels there. So I've got 4 sections there. The top one's a little bit smaller, but that's just sort of the angle we're looking at it from. Give you a second to catch up on that. Because the next thing we're going to be doing is using our palette knife. Excuse me. So this palette knife I have here is a plastic palette knife, but if you have a metal palette knife, that's great. That's probably even better than this one. What you want to make sure is that it's got this long top. So some palette knives are more like a spade sort of shape, and we want to make sure we have one that's this long top. So if you don't have a palette knife at home, you can use like an old gift card or an old credit card or something. That will work just as well. So, I mean, this will be better, of course, because some of the smaller details you want this, but if you don't have it, a credit card will work just fine. So if you don't have a palette knife, go ahead and grab like an old gift card or something like that, an expired, you know, credit card, something like that for this next part. So I'm gonna grab a little bit more of my light blue. So I have some in my palette, but I wanna pick up a little bit more. I'm gonna add that to my palette. Then we're gonna start light. We're gonna start with our lightest colors and sort of work our way to like the more dramatic, darker colors as we get a little more confident with the palette knife. So that being said, you might wanna do some practices with your palette knife. So here, let's do that. I've got a little piece of paper here. You can even flip your canvas over and practice right on the back if you want to. If you've just never used it before, you want to just get a little bit of a hang of it. I highly recommend practicing on something other than your canvas. So I've got my palette knife here. I'm going to hold it like this. So you can see I've got a good grip on the handle, and my finger is supporting the top of the handle. So that way I have a good bit of control over where my palette knife is going. I'm not just holding it like this or something, because I don't really have good control that way. I've got my finger sort of bracing the blade of the palette knife to make sure that I have really good control. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to dip it into my light blue, and then I'm going to wipe a lot of it off. So I don't want much paint on my palette knife for what we're going to be doing on this painting. So you can see here, there's really hardly any paint. I kind of wiped most of it off. What we're going to do is we're going to place our palette knife down on the paper and we're going to drag. So we're getting these sort of really, we're going to get these sort of really subtle, sort of distressed looking layers. So this is what we're looking for. That's where all of this detail comes from in our final painting. You're trying to practice kind of, you know, you can tell I had more paint there. Just get like a really good feel for what it looks like when you have more paint versus less paint, what it looks like when you put, you know, your palette knife upright versus parallel to your paper, that sort of thing. So just sort of get a good feel for how the palette knife feels in your hand, how to control it. Try a few different things, try a few different grips. If this one doesn't feel comfortable for you, just get a good feel for what this is going to feel like in your hand. That's really important for palette knife painting, especially if it's something you've never done before, because it's very different than painting with a brush. So that's why even sometimes if I haven't done a palette knife painting in a while, I'll practice before I actually do it on my painting, because it just takes a minute to kind of remind yourself. It's like muscle memory, but if you're new at this, then you don't have that muscle memory. So make sure that you practice a little. That's what I'm doing here. I've got my palette knife and I've got light blue, and I'm just practicing with putting very, very, very little paint on my palette knife just to get a feel for what it's going to be like when I paint it on my canvas. Okay, so I feel good about it. So once you've done that, you want to go ahead and pick up a little bit more light blue. Like I said, we're going to start with the lighter colors. I'm going to wipe off most of it, just a little bit at a time. You can always build it up, but with things like this, it's pretty hard to take it away. So always start small, less is more. So I've got a little bit of light blue on my palette knife. I'm sort of bracing it with my pointer finger. I'm going to start on these lines that we painted in our shiplap. I'm going to start right there with the line above my palette knife, and I'm going to drag down. And I'm going to start making that texture to look like it's sort of distressed or like paint is chipping off. That's what we're going to do here. And I'm going to do that on each of the lines. So going all the way down, it looks sort of like a shadow even maybe. I'm going to put some over here. So I'm just sort of using the tip of the palette knife here because I don't want it to get on the pumpkin. And then I don't want to forget about the bottom lines. Make sure you've got some coming down over here. If you want to turn your painting, if that feels more comfortable for you to sort of pull down that way, I highly recommend it. I always move my painting around when I'm painting. And then we don't want to forget the top either. We're just going to put a little bit of paint on the corners, the top corners, because we don't want it to be blank up there. All right, so hopefully you like what happened with your palette knife. That's what I said. I always like to start with lighter colors because it's less dramatic, you know, on top of our sort of cream and beige background that we had. We started with navy blue and something went wrong and you weren't happy with it, it'd be really hard to fix. So we want to start with really light colors and then build up to those dark dramatic colors. But before we're done with the light blue, so you can see here, we want to make sure that our painting is grounded. And what I mean by that is that right now, our pumpkin is just sort of floating in the air, right? This looks like it's a paneled wall and our pumpkin is sitting on nothing. It's just sort of floating in space. And we don't want that, of course. So instead of having to paint the bottom, we just want to put some more darkness and some more paint onto the bottom to look like it is sitting on something, like maybe there's a ground or some shadow beneath it. So we just want to paint some more with our palette knife underneath it, and we're going to sort of build that up. We just really want it to look different than the rest of our painting so that we know that it is different than the rest of our painting. We know that it's not the wall. Just sort of imply that it's grounded, imply that there's some shadow down there. So you can see I just sort of, I'll hold it up a little bit for you guys. I just added more blue to the bottom. So you can see now, we're not really sure what it's sitting on, but we know that it's not floating in space. We know that it's sitting on something because the bottom panel is different from the wall. Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna wipe this blue off my palette knife. You can dip it in water if you feel like maybe it dried on there a little bit before we pick up our next color. Oops. paper towels are sticking together tonight.
And Jesse, everybody's painting along and just saying how great of a teacher you are.
Oh, thanks, guys. I'm glad. I'm glad you guys are painting along, and I'm glad that you're enjoying yourself and hopefully learning too. I really love doing these paint nights, so I'm glad that you guys still like to do them with me. Okay, so I just wiped the light blue off of my palette knife. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna pick up some vintage white now. So again, the vintage white is just like a more ivory white. So if you just have pure white, like titanium white or something, mix just a little bit of brown into it on your palette paper and before you pick it up. So I've already got vintage white, so I'm just gonna go ahead and pick it up. And again, I wanna make sure that I don't have, I'm gonna slide this over for now so you can see my palette. I wanna make sure I don't have very much on there because we are going to start adding some highlights to our pumpkins. So you can see here, we've got some sort of distressing going on our pumpkins. So that's what we're gonna add. And again, don't forget, less is more. So wipe off most of the paint. It's hard to see, of course, because my palette knife is white as well, but there's hardly any paint on there. I'm starting with very little paint. So I'm gonna hold it just like I've been holding it. I've got the handle in my hand and I'm bracing the blade with my pointer finger. And I'm gonna start at the top because that's really where there would be highlights. And I'm just gonna sort of rub the tip onto my canvas. So just the very tip of the palette knife. We're sort of just, it feels like almost like chalk or something. We're just sort of like sketching it onto the surface of the canvas. You can see how little paint is going on there, which is good. I like that. I like how it's just a little bit at a time. I can build it up if I want to. I can put more or less in certain places. Because again, it's really tricky to take it off. Not impossible, but tricky. So since we're talking about it, if you do have some sort of, stroke of your palette knife and you just feel like it really went awry and you just really don't like the way it looks, I would recommend you let it dry. So say I didn't like this white here. Say I wanted to I wish that wasn't there, okay? Or I wanted to take it down a notch. I would either hit it with my hairdryer or let it dry, and I would take my palette knife and go back over it with the base color. So what that's gonna do is you're gonna keep that texture that you've gotten, but it's gonna be less white. The blue is gonna have that same sort of organic texture over it, and there's gonna be less white showing. So again, if you feel like you've got some sort of palette knife stroke that is just distracting or you feel like it's a little bit too much, let it dry and then go back over it with your palette knife with the base coat color, and it'll, like I said, it'll just make it a little less dramatic. So again, we're just using vintage white and we're using the tip of our palette knife to highlight our pumpkins. Do a little bit down further maybe. I really like how the white looks, so just sort of smearing paint on it, really. That's basically all a palette knife is. When all is said and done, that's basically what this technique is, and that's why it's so fun. Put some more white at the top. And then I don't want to forget about my smaller pumpkins. I'm going to go over and I'm going to add some highlights to this little guy as well. You can see that I'm controlling the blade of my palette knife with my finger. And I really do like the irregularity. So sometimes you get a big swipe and sometimes you get a small swipe, and you can try your best to control it, but you just really can't ever control it as well as you can control a brush. And that's kind of part of the fun of it. It's kind of like a surprise, it looks much looser, but that's really what I like about painting with a palette knife. Okay, so I feel like that's good for the white for now. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna wipe my palette knife off. Excuse me. Okay, so the next color we're gonna do is I'm gonna grab I've got some navy on my palette, but I kind of watered that down earlier if you remember, and I also ended up getting some light blue into it. So I'm gonna put some fresh navy paint on my palette. So navy blue here, just a little bit. I don't want to see watered down. I want to make sure I have the full body paint. We watered that one down earlier, so I don't want that for this part. So we're gonna add a lot of navy blue. You can see in our final painting, there's a lot of darkness going on, and that's where we're going to be adding this blue. Okay. So again, we're kind of getting more comfortable with the palette knife. I feel like we're a little more confident with how it goes on our canvas. We did some practice. We've done the light blue, we've done the white. We kind of understand how much paint we need to have on the blade before we, put it to our canvas. So that's why I feel like we're ready to do this really deep, dark color. Again, don't stress if you feel like you put it somewhere and it looks too much. You can always go back and take it away by adding the base color. So here, we're gonna start by adding it to the shiplap, just like we added the light blue earlier. So I'm gonna go to that line, I'm gonna pull down, and you can sort of play with how much paint. Don't forget, if you feel like you wanna add more, if you're feeling sort of adventurous, feel free. Or you can keep it really light if you want, that's fine too. I really like the darker colors, so I'm gonna add a little bit more as I go. Go down to this one here.
Looking good.
Thanks, Kira. And then again, I want to focus a lot on the bottom, just like we talked about before, about grounding our pumpkins. We don't want to ignore the bottom because we want it to look different than the top part. We want it to look different than the wall behind it. We don't want our pumpkins to be floating. So I'm going to pay close attention to the edges. So I'm kind of like rubbing it on the edges. Can you see that, how I'm doing that? Here, I'll hold it up higher. I'm sort of like rubbing it on the edges, and that just really sort of makes the edges pop. It sort of frames the whole painting. And it looks really pretty that way. It looks like there's paint chipping off of my painting, which I love it for this. It's sort of farmhouse look. So I'm sort of rubbing it on the edges. I've got navy paint. I'm paying close attention to the bottom section. You can even do it on the sides. If you've got your sides painted, you can go down and you can add it to the sides and make the sides look distressed if you're not planning on framing it. Add a little more navy, I think. Yeah, I really like that swipe there. That looks really pretty. And then I'm gonna do the same thing to the top. So I don't wanna add a ton to the top, but I do wanna frame the edges up here too so it matches, so they don't look so blank. Just add a little bit up there so it's not, so it matches the rest of the painting. Again, really paying close attention to the corners. Because if you think about it, so it's sort of the same thing if you're distressing a piece of furniture. If you want it to look like there's paint chipped off, think about, with real wear and tear, where would the paint chip off most? It's always anything that's protruding from it. So it's the knobs, it's the corners, it's the feet, it's the edges of the drawers if we're talking about furniture. So that's why I want to make sure you pay close attention to the edges of this painting, because if this really had been chipped over time, it would be the edges that had the most wear and tear. So that's why we're paying close attention to those edges. Just makes it look more real. And then I also want to add some navy blue to our pumpkins. So we sort of added that white to be a little bit of a highlight. So I'm going to add some navy coming up from the bottom to be sort of a shadow. I'm going to start at the bottom, I'm going to pull up, trying to follow my pumpkin shape. But again, it doesn't need to be perfect. It's really hard to paint something really detailed and specific with a palette knife, especially if you're new to it. So don't stress if it goes off the edge a little bit or something, that's totally fine. We just want to get some darkness down there so it looks like we've got a little bit of a shadow. You can see I'm kind of following the lines we did, sort of following the segments of the pumpkin, because of course there would be shadow there behind those segments. And I'm gonna do the same thing for my smaller pumpkins. I'm gonna be a little more careful because this is a light pumpkin. Start a little slower, but I'm doing the same thing. So there was a lot there, so I'm gonna be careful where I swipe that. Just got a lot of paint on there. I'm gonna proceed with caution. Again, I'm going to follow these segments. That's where there'd be shadow. Pumpkins are like almost faceted. They've got these sections to them. Don't want to forget about that. then last but not least, with the navy, we were going to add a little bit of shadow to our stem. So we're kind of just picturing, we haven't really picked a light source. We talk about that a lot in our Let's Paint Lives and our Monday paint nights. You know, how to make a paint look more realistic, how to decide where shadows are going to be. So for this one, we didn't really pick a specific light source. We're just sort of painting this painting as if the light's coming from the top and then the shadows are all coming from the bottom. So that being said, we're going to think about that when we're painting our stems, and we're just going to put shadows sort of on the inside of these little stems that we've made here, sort of like the underside of them, how we have them sort of slanted. There's going to be shadows beneath. So that's what we're going to use, the very tip of our palette knife or the very corner of our credit card, whatever it is we may be using. And we're going to paint just a little bit of navy in there, very loosely, just adding some shadow. And do a little bit on this guy too. There we go. So now we have a little bit more dimension to those stems. I'm going to rinse, that was the last of our navy. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to rinse my palette knife off. So for the next color, I don't know if you guys remember, but we mixed the color of our stems. It's sort of like a pretty mushroom color. We mixed real brown with the vintage white. So I'm going to mix a little more of that now because I want to use some of that for our shiplap, for adding some texture and dimension with our palette knife. So I'm going to use my palette knife to mix it, which is really what palette knives are intended for. So I'm going to grab a little bit of real brown and a little bit of my vintage white, and I'm going to mix those together on my palette. To get that nice mushroomy light brown color that we got before. And it doesn't need to be perfect. Just try to get as close as you can. Does not need to be perfect. That got kind of light, so I'm going to add some more brown. And it's really great to get in the habit, if you have a palette knife at home, of mixing paint with the palette knife, because A, you waste less paint. You can see there's hardly any left. You don't have it all stuck in your brush. And B, it's really better for your brushes. It's not a great idea to mix paint with brushes just because it really gets, they just get really like moppy with paint, and you have to rinse them more, and like the paint can get down the ferrule. It just can be kind of a mess. So, you know, I definitely do because I'm more of a casual painter, but it is great to have a palette knife for mixing. Okay, so I have this nice light brown color. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna add some palette knife painting to the shiplap, just like we did with the light blue and then again with the navy. So I'm gonna go over that with my light brown. You can do a little or a lot. This is sort of a good opportunity if you feel like you have a lot of navy somewhere and you want to go back and tone it down. This is a great opportunity to do that. I'm gonna add a little more brown because I feel like this is kind of close to my background color. I didn't really notice it until I was painting on my background color, but I'm gonna add some more brown to make sure that pops off. So adding a little more of my real brown. And that's okay to do. I do that a lot. I pick a color and I'm like, oh, this looks great. And then I start painting it on my canvas and I change my mind. So you can always go back and, you know, remix and reapply to your canvas. There's nothing wrong with that. So I like this darker brown, so I'm gonna go ahead and use this one instead. Much better. Don't want to forget about the bottom again. I want to make sure I've got lots of darkness down there, lots of darker colors to make sure. Oop, that was a big smear, but I like it. Sometimes you have to pause and it's like your heart stops and you have to decide whether you like it or not, but I do like it.
It totally looks intentional. You're good.
Good. No one ever has to know. So I'm just adding this darkness here. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a little bit of this to the bottom of my pumpkins too. I just like bringing that warm brown into them, just sort of over where we did the navy blue. There.
And now my favorite part, the treasure gold.
Yeah, so we're coming up on the last step of our farmhouse pumpkins. which is using the palette knife to add our treasure gold. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna grab a new sheet of palette paper for the grand finale, just to make sure I have lots of room for, I don't wanna get it mixed up with my other paints because it's so beautiful. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna stick that to the side. And I'm gonna grab my treasure gold. So again, this is called treasure gold in case I hadn't said it enough. And this is really the most metallic and shiny paint that you can find that is non-toxic and water-based. So this is one of my absolute favorite paints. I was like, is this not open? One of my absolute favorite paints to use. You can see on my palette how shiny it is.
I'm just jealous you found a new bottle of treasure gold in the studio.
I know, right? I didn't think it was new because I could see that there's some on the top. I think they just had the lid still on it. But you can see how shiny it is. It comes in tons of colors, lots of different gold variations, silvers, jewel tones. So you can get this at Michael's. It is beautiful and it is probably my favorite paint that we have. So make sure you go ahead and get yourself a bottle of that if you don't already. All right, so we're basically gonna add treasure gold to everything. So a little bit of treasure gold all over. We're gonna focus on the areas where we have highlights. So we're gonna put it on the back and we're gonna put it towards the top of our paintings to sort of look like the sun is shining on our pumpkins maybe. So really the only place we're not gonna add treasure gold is the bottom of our pumpkins. Everywhere else where we have our palette knife work, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna add our treasure gold. So I'm gonna pick it up, again, we're doing it the same way we've been doing it, supporting my blade of my palette knife with my pointer finger. And I'm picking it up and then I'm wiping most of it off. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna add to the background and it's just so shiny. Even just the little bit, like when you add this little bit of palette knife, it's just like a tiny bit of paint and it still just shines. You can see it in the camera, my gosh, it shines so beautifully.
And we will be back next week. I will get with the Michael's team and make sure our class is up, but we will be here for the rest of the year through December. We'll be here on Monday nights. So just be checking back for our classes.
Yeah.
We've got Andy Jones coming up. He's gonna be teaching with Pure Pigment. We've got Jesse, Kirsten. So we've got a lot of classes still, some really good seasonal fun stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Get anywhere.
Cranking paintings out as fast as the team is as fast as they can for you guys. So it's awesome.
Yeah.
But Michael's has asked us to be a part of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're so lucky. We're so
We
fortunate
are.
to get Monday nights.
Yeah, we've got a pumpkin class. We've got 2 more classes this week with Michael's. So we've got we're doing some pouring and we're doing some, I think, Mod Podge pumpkins on Friday. So 2 more classes this week. We got a busy week.
Awesome. Yeah, we did. It was fun though. Or it is fun.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm adding it to the top of my pumpkins now. You can see, I'm trying to show you guys how shiny it is. You can see it shining in the lights already. It's still wet too. When it dries, it's even shinier. So I'm just adding it to the tops of my pumpkins, adding it I like how it warms up the painting and it gives it a little bit of highlight. I'm gonna add a little to the top of my stems too, so they have a nice highlight. That was a lot, that's okay. And I don't want to forget my edges either. I want to make sure I go and I want to pay attention to the edges and add lots of shine. This beautiful, beautiful, beautiful treasure gold. So that is it. Thank you. That is it for our farmhouse pumpkins. So like Kiera said, make sure you check out, keep checking back for next week's class because we will be here. And that's all. Yeah. Back to you, Kiera.
All right, well, I'm still here. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you, Michaels. We will be here next Monday. We are here 2 more times this weekend or this week with just some fun fall projects. So thank you guys so much for joining us. Again, just check back michaels.com. And again, you can watch this video on their community classroom page and get all these awesome products to craft along and paint along. So thank you guys, everybody. We'll see you guys soon. Bye.